Hello, everyone. Thank you guys for tuning in. So, today we're going to cover Property Tax 101, which is pretty much going to focus on understanding your property tax bill. So, let's go ahead and get started. The goals and objective of this presentation will be to initially break down the layout of your Cook County tax bill, explain and simplify the process of calculating your taxes, also give viewers a better insight into the current taxation problem that we all face, and then lastly, staying true to our mission statement as a Village Watchdog Group, we aim to educate, inform, and empower residents so that they'll be able to fight for fair taxation of both their homes and their properties. I felt that this particular cartoon kind of summarizes, unfortunately, the real life situation that residents are dealing with. It says our taxes are now more than our mortgage payment, and it cites that taxation is theft. Well, I feel like a lot of residents feel that way just due to the fact that the taxes in Maywood are just going up so quick. So, the layout of this presentation, initially what I'm going to do is to review some key terms that you need to understand in order to dissect your bill, go over some basic simplified calculations so you can calculate your own taxes, and then lastly, if time allows, talk a little bit about Maywood's current tax rate, and then really hammer home what it is when we talk about an equalization factor. So, what are property taxes? A property tax is basically a tax or a levy that's placed on land, buildings, property within a municipality. Well, what's the purpose of the property taxes? Generally, property taxes are supposed to be collected to cover the cost of helping to pay for mandated services that a municipality actually provides, whether it's to upkeep the roads, put money into developing the infrastructure, pay for education, so on and so forth. This is a sample tax bill, and what I did was break it down into two particular categories. The first category is a property identifier, and basically what a property identifier does is allow the different Cook County agencies to be able to specifically identify or identify individual properties. So when you see something like this, the classification code, that automatically lets those agencies know whether it's a single family home, a multi-family unit, so on and so forth. This area also has the year of the tax bill. It says what township the property is in, and then most importantly, it gives your PIN number, which is an individual identification number for your particular property. The second half of the bill is broken down into taxing districts. And taxing districts are basically when the Cook County property taxes are divvied up, it lets the Cook County agency knows who's going to get what cut of the pie. Okay, so you can see here the different tax years, the percentages that each of these entities that are requesting tax dollars is requesting, and then it even gives information about various pensions amounts. So here is a tax calculator. It may look kind of confusing now, but by the end of this presentation, it's going to be simple. 1, 2, 3. What I did was to break it down by different areas. So highlighted in red are the values I'm going to focus on. Highlighted in green are either assessment levels, equalization factors, or tax rates. And then, this area here specifies or it basically identifies the different exemptions that a taxpayer may or may not be eligible for. All right, so looking at terminology. First key category, we're going to deal with our values. So anytime you see property value on your tax bill, that's what the assessor is trying to assess. It's supposed to be the quote unquote fair market value, meaning if the assessor's office was to put your property on the market, they're saying that your property value is actually what that property potentially could sell for. Whereas the assessed value and the equalized assessed value is your property value after they've done some various calculations to it, okay? The next category are different types of rates, levels, and factors, and all of those I'll get to in the following slides. So let's start with an assessment level. every property is going to be either assessed at a 10% level or a 25% level. Okay, so if it's 10%, that's generally a residential property. Or sometimes for commercial property, if they give them a tax incentive, they'll drop them down to the 10% level. Commercial properties, for all intents and purposes, are usually assessed at a 25% level, which ultimately means that commercial properties are supposed to pay more taxes. So I put this in here, and I used it in a previous presentation, but it kind of just summarized everything so beautifully. Case in point, if you look here, you'll see that of all the properties, if it's a residential property or commercial property, the property that ends up paying the most generally are the ones that have the highest assessed value. Okay, so I want you to keep that key principle together. The other thing is this: just like Maywood, if Maywood was to come up with $1,000 budget that they had to get that amount of funds, the responsibility to contribute to that $1,000 are going to be broken up by all of the property and all the land in the village, and depending on how they're assessed is going to determine how much they have to contribute to that $1,000. Equalization factor. All right, this slide is very busy, very difficult to see through. If you're a person who just wants all the facts, I put it in there for you, but this presentation is about keeping it simple, so that's what I'm going to do. Basically, equalization factor is just like the name says. It's about equalizing something, and in this instance, the purpose of this value is supposed to be to equalize the assessed value amongst different communities. This is a number that's created by the Illinois Department of Revenue, and basically what it says is that if you have a certain house in Maywood and you compare it to a similar house in another neighborhood, we want to see if we can try and make sure that the assessed values are kind of on the same level. So it's just once again, a effort supposedly to level the playing field between communities. Okay, I put this in here because I think, once again, it says a lot. So for the taxes we pay, you think our trash could get picked up on time and by limousine. I'll drop that there and leave it for you guys to kind of mull that over, because I think we understand the extent of how high our property taxes are and whether or not the services that we're currently getting are consistent with the dollars that we're paying. So, once again, like I said, on the tax bill, you have the various taxing districts. I'm just going to go over them briefly. The first category is the municipality and township. So that would include Maywood and the Proviso Township on our tax bills. As far as the school system, and then the next category is the Cook County part, and then miscellaneous, which includes like the library, the park district, the water reclamation district. All said and done, these are the different districts, once again, that when the tax dollar pie is created, everybody's asking for a certain piece of that pie. Well, let's look and see how that pie is actually divvied up. So, Maywood's tax rate is 21.667, okay? Of that 21.667, 13 of it goes to just the municipality, meaning Maywood. Okay? The next highest expenditure goes to the schools. Okay, and you'll say, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, think about it like this. If you were going to go ahead and buy a large car, okay? Not only do you want to know what the sales price is going to be, but the other most important variable is how much in taxes you're going to have to pay. Okay? My question to you is this. If you're buying a car, would you rather pay 10% tax, or would you rather pay 21.667% tax? So like I said, we'll get into the ins and outs of the taxation and the tax rate issue in Maywood, but for right now, I'm just laying the foundation, and that's pretty much what that part of your tax bill shows. It shows who's getting what part of your tax dollars, okay? But I think the problem with Maywood is there's such a large quantity of the taxes that are being used or being taken to run the day-to-day function of the village, even though all our needs aren't being met as far as the different things in the village. So let's do these basic calculations and then let's give it a wrap. Okay, so once again, assessed values are in red. So let's run through them real quick. So property value, like I said, that's just the fair market value that the assessor's office comes up with. Assessed level, like I said, this most likely is either a residential property or a commercial property who has a tax incentive, which decrease this assessment level. Okay, so you pretty much multiply that times the 95,000. That gives you your now assessed level. You then take in consideration the equalization factor, which once again levels the playing field as far as assessments. That then becomes called, or then is now called, the equalized assessed value. And then lastly, you multiply it times your tax rate, and that will give you what your tax bill is going to be before exemptions. Now, if you are a person who owns that home and you live there, that's your primary residence, you can qualify for a homeowner's exemption to further decrease your tax bill, or a senior exemption or freeze. But in this instance, the individual may have been an investor, or that wasn't their primary residence, so they didn't qualify for any of that. So their final tax bill is going to be the same as this number. So that's the ins and outs of calculating your tax bills. I hope that helped to simplify the process for Okay, so just to kind of give you guys a little information on some upcoming events. As you may or may not know, we already released part 1 of Help, Why Do My Taxes Keep Going Up? In part 2 of that series, we're going to continue to follow the Jacksons and dealing with their property tax issues, and we're more so going to focus on who and what are responsible for the massive increases in their taxes. This is part 1 of Property Taxes 101, and in part 2, we're now going to focus on how your tax bills are created and who's actually responsible for those numbers. Who's responsible for the increases in your tax bills from year to year, and who's responsible for putting all that information together. And then lastly, this week is going to be another board meeting. So the episode 3 of the Rewind, which is pretty much like a condensed version of a summary of the board meetings, will be coming out sometime later this week. So once again, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, please like and share. And then if you haven't already considered it, think about becoming part of our Facebook family. We're going to be putting a lot of important information out there to help get everybody in the know. And the more people that we have watching, the more people who can get up to date with the things that are truly happening in our community. So once again, thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to talking to you guys in the future.